C.O.P.S, Central Organization of Police Specialists. In a future time, protecting Empire City from Big Boss and his gang of crooks.
In 1988, Hasbro made a bet on the future. A cyberpunk police squad set in the year 2020, neon cities, high-tech weapons, cybernetically enhanced cops fighting organized crime, 65 episodes produced, a full toy line launched, comic books published, everything pointed to the next G.I. Joe, the next Transformers, the next massive multimedia franchise. And then in less than a year, it vanished. By 1989, C.O.P.S was gone. Toys on clearance racks. The show pulled from rotation, no second season, no reboot, no legacy. And for a lot of kids, it didn't end with an announcement or a finale. It just stopped showing up one Saturday morning. One week it was there, the next week it was gone. Here's the thing most people don't know, this wasn't a failure. The toys sold, the show had an audience, kids loved it. C.O.P.S didn't disappear because it was bad. It disappeared because it was caught in a perfect storm, bad timing, shifting markets, and a cultural change that made it impossible to survive. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why a 65-episode, toy-backed cartoon with everything going for it disappeared in just 1 year, and what it reveals about the moment Saturday morning television quietly changed forever. Okay, let's set the scene. It's 1988. You're sitting in front of the TV on a Saturday morning. Your cereal bowl is in your lap. The screen flashes with chrome letters and neon lights, and then you hear it. Fighting crime in a future time. That theme song. If you grew up with this show, it's burned into your brain. The driving beat, the synthesizers, the sheer 80s energy of it. C.O.P.S, which stood for Central Organization of Police Specialists, was set in a fictional metropolis called Empire City in the year 2020. A specialized squad of cybernetically enhanced police officers with unique abilities battling a sprawling crime syndicate led by a mobster named Big Boss and his crew of colorful criminals called the Crooks. Think about this for a second. This wasn't just cops and robbers. This was futuristic cops and robbers, bulletproof, the indestructible leader with a metal torso that made him immune to bullets, Longarm with his extending cybernetic arms that could reach across entire rooms, Sundown, the sharpshooter with enhanced vision, Mace, the riot control expert, Hardtop, the driver. Each cop had a gimmick, a specialty, a toy-ready design that made them instantly recognizable and, more importantly, instantly marketable. The villains were equally over the top. Big Boss, the crime lord who ran Empire City's underworld from the shadows. Berserko, the unhinged strongman who smashed everything in sight. Dr. Bad Vibes, the mad scientist with a transparent dome showing his brain. Nightshade, the femme fatale. Buttons McBoom Boom, the demolitions expert. Each one was a cartoon exaggeration of classic crime archetypes designed to be visually distinct and memorable. It was DIC Entertainment doing what they did best. Bright colors, clear good versus evil dynamics, episodic adventures you could jump into at any point without needing to know what happened last week. The animation was standard Saturday morning fare, nothing groundbreaking, but the character designs were sharp, the world building was surprisingly detailed, and the tone walked that perfect line between action-packed and kid-friendly. 65 episodes were produced. That's important. That's not a show that got canceled early. That's a full syndication package. That's exactly how many episodes you needed to run a show 5 days a week for 13 weeks, then loop it indefinitely. That's a show that was designed from day one to run its course, sell toys, and print money. So here's the question. If everything was built for success, if the formula was proven, if the show did exactly what it was supposed to do, why did it disappear? Let me explain what Hasbro was thinking in 1988. By that point, the toy cartoon formula was proven. It wasn't experimental. It wasn't risky. It was a money-printing machine. Transformers had launched in 1984 and became a cultural phenomenon. G.I. Joe was dominating ratings and toy aisles. He-Man, Thundercats, Mask, Silverhawks. Every major toy company had figured out the playbook. Create a toy line, create a cartoon to promote it, watch the money roll in. The FCC had loosened regulations on children's advertising in the early 80s, which meant toy companies could essentially produce 22-minute commercials disguised as entertainment, and nobody could stop them. It was the golden age of the toy-driven cartoon. Hasbro looked at the success of RoboCop in 1987, the rise of cyberpunk aesthetics in movies and comics, the enduring appeal of cop shows and crime dramas, and thought, we can own this space. We can create the definitive futuristic police franchise. C.O.P.S wasn't just a cartoon, it was a multimedia launch. The toys hit shelves in 1988, big, chunky 6-inch figures. Larger than the standard 3 3/4-inch G.I. Joe scale, cap-firing weapons, heavily detailed sculpts. These weren't cheap knockoffs. These were premium action figures with moving parts, accessories, vehicles, and playsets. The packaging was slick, the marketing was aggressive, and the positioning was clear. This was the next big thing. DC Comics published a series tying into the show, giving it legitimacy beyond Saturday morning and reaching an older audience of comic readers who might have aged out of cartoons but still bought toys. Retailers loved it. Early orders were strong. The show aired in syndication, meaning it could run in any market, any time slot, giving it maximum exposure across the country. And here's the crazy part. By all accounts, it worked. The toys sold, kids bought the figures, the show had an audience, parents recognized the brand, everything was going according to plan. But here's where it gets weird. Hasbro only produced about a dozen figures, a handful of vehicles, 1 or 2 playsets, then they stopped. No second wave, no expansion, characters that appeared prominently in the show never got toys. Planned items were quietly shelved, production support dried up. Why? Because while C.O.P.S was selling, something else was selling faster. The Nintendo Entertainment Systems. By 1988, the NES wasn't just a toy, it was the toy. US sales were climbing into the billions. Kids who used to spend their allowance on action figures were now saving up for Super Mario Bros. 3 and The Legend of Zelda. The entire toy market was being disrupted. Traditional action figure sales were flattening. Video games were the new obsession. Hasbro saw the numbers, they saw the shift, and they made a choice: pull resources from C.O.P.S and put them into brands with longer legs. Brands that could survive the video game wave. Brands that had already proven they could adapt and endure. C.O.P.S wasn't failing, it was just not essential. And that's the first crack in the story. The toy line that was supposed to fuel the cartoon's longevity got cut off at the knees before it could build momentum. Now let's talk about the battlefield. 1988 wasn't just any year for cartoons, it was peak Saturday morning. The market was absolutely flooded with competing shows, all fighting for the same audience, the same airtime, the same toy aisle space. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles had just exploded into a cultural juggernaut. The cartoon launched in late 1987, and by 1988 it was everywhere. Toys, lunchboxes, video games, movies. It was the biggest thing in kids' entertainment. Transformers was still going strong in its 4th season. G.I. Joe was a ratings titan with years of brand recognition. Even RoboCop, a hyper-violent R-rated movie, got a sanitized cartoon that launched the same year as C.O.P.S. The competition wasn't just fierce, it was overwhelming. C.O.P.S was competing for shelf space, airtime, and kids' attention against franchises that had years of momentum and brand recognition. It was the new kid trying to break into a lunch table that was already full. And then there was the other problem, the name. In March 1989, just months after C.O.P.S launched, Fox premiered a little reality show called C.O.P.S. You know the one? Bad boys, what you gonna do? Suddenly, there were 2 shows called C.O.P.S on television. One was a gritty, real-life look at policing, filmed on location with actual police officers, arrests, domestic disputes, car chases. The other was a cartoon about cyborg cops in the future fighting a crime boss named Big Boss. The confusion was immediate. Parents flipping through TV guides saw C.O.P.S and didn't know which one they were getting. Networks got nervous about the overlap, advertisers worried about brand confusion. Hasbro tried to rebrand the show as Cyber C.O.P.S. when it moved to CBS for a brief run, but the damage was done. The identity was muddied, the momentum was lost, the clean, simple branding that makes a franchise stick in people's minds was compromised. But here's the thing most people miss. It wasn't just competition and bad timing. It was a cultural shift. By the late 80s, there was growing backlash against half-hour toy commercials. Critics, parents, educators, and advocacy groups were pushing back on violent, militarized kids' shows. The idea that cartoons were just vehicles to sell guns and war toys to children was becoming uncomfortable. Organizations like Action for Children's Television were lobbying for stricter regulations. The FCC was starting to pay attention again. The cultural mood was shifting. It wasn't banned. It wasn't censored. There was no controversy, no boycott, no scandal. It just quietly became less appealing. Networks looking to avoid criticism and maintain advertiser relationships began prioritizing shows that could be framed as educational or pro-social. Shows that were obviously just toy commercials were getting quietly phased out, and so after 65 episodes, C.O.P.S faded. No finale, no big send-off, no explanation, just gone. The show finished its syndication run. The toy line was discontinued, the comic book ended, and that was it. For most kids, C.O.P.S just stopped showing up on Saturday mornings and they moved on to the next thing. But here's what's interesting, it was never really forgotten. So where is C.O.P.S now? Here's the surprising part. It never really died. If you go on YouTube right now, you'll find full episodes uploaded, compilations of the best moments, retrospectives analyzing the show's place in 80s cartoon history. The intro theme has millions of views. The comments are full of people saying the same thing. I forgot about this show, but the second I heard that theme, it all came back. That's the power of nostalgia. That theme song, those character designs, that specific flavor of 80s Saturday morning energy. It's all still there, waiting to be rediscovered. On Facebook, there are groups dedicated to the Hasbro C.O.P.S and Crooks toy line. People sharing photos of their childhood figures, collectors hunting down rare items, comparing condition, talking about which characters they wish had gotten toys. The toys that ended up on clearance racks in 1989, the ones parents bought for $3 just to get rid of them, some of them go for serious money now, not crazy money, not vintage Star Wars money, but enough that collectors take them seriously. C.O.P.S has become a cult favorite, a deep-cut piece of 80s nostalgia that only a certain generation remembers, which makes it feel even more special. It's not mainstream enough to be everywhere, but it's not obscure enough to be completely forgotten. It exists in that perfect middle space where discovery feels personal. And here's what's fascinating. We're living in the golden age of nostalgia content. Streaming data shows that older library content now accounts for nearly 70% of total viewing time on streaming services. People want to revisit the past. They want to understand the shows and toys that shaped their childhoods. They want to know the behind-the-scenes stories, the business decisions, the reasons why things succeeded or failed. C.O.P.S fits perfectly into that space. It's obscure enough to feel like a discovery, but recognizable enough to trigger memories. It's a show people half remember, and that makes it compelling. You remember the theme song, you remember a character or two, you remember the vibe, but you don't remember the details, and that gap creates curiosity. But here's the question everyone asks. Could it come back? Honestly, it's complicated. On one hand, nostalgia reboots are everywhere. He-Man got a reboot on Netflix. Transformers never stopped. G.I. Joe keeps getting reimagined. Even obscure properties like Biker Mice from Mars and Street Sharks are getting second looks from studios hungry for recognizable IP. On the other hand, C.O.P.S is a show about police. In 2025, that's a loaded concept. The straightforward cops are heroes framing that worked in 1988 doesn't land the same way today. The cultural conversation around policing, authority, and justice has changed dramatically. Could you reimagine it? Make it more nuanced, add shades of gray, accountability, systemic critique? Absolutely. But at that point, is it still C.O.P.S? Or is it something else wearing the name? And maybe that's okay. Maybe C.O.P.S is perfect as a time capsule, a snapshot of a moment when we believed in high-tech futures, clear-cut heroes, and the idea that the good guys always win. A moment when Saturday morning cartoons were unapologetically designed to sell toys, and nobody thought twice about it. A moment before video games changed everything, before the internet, before streaming, before the cultural conversation got complicated. So here's what really happened to C.O.P.S. It wasn't a failure, it wasn't a flop. The show did exactly what it was designed to do: run 65 episodes, sell toys, entertain kids, but it existed in a very specific moment, a narrow window of time when the toy cartoon formula still worked, when cyberpunk was the future, when kids still played with action figures instead of game controllers, and when a show about futuristic cops could be straightforwardly heroic without raising uncomfortable questions. And then that moment ended. The Nintendo Entertainment System changed everything. The toy market shifted. Video games became the dominant form of play. The cultural conversation around violence in children's media intensified. The backlash against toy commercials disguised as cartoons reached a tipping point. And C.O.P.S., like so many other ambitious toy lines and cartoons from that era, got left behind. Not because it was bad, not because it failed, but because the world moved on. Hasbro made a calculated decision to cut their losses and focus on proven franchises. Networks made a calculated decision to avoid controversy. Parents made a calculated decision to buy their kids a Nintendo instead of another action figure. And C.O.P.S. quietly faded into the background, remembered by a generation, but never quite achieving the cultural staying power of its competitors. But here's the lesson, and this is what makes the story of C.O.P.S. so interesting. Sometimes the things we forget are the most revealing. The shows that didn't become mega franchises, the toys that didn't get a second wave, the ideas that were just a little too early, or a little too late, or caught in the wrong moment. These are the stories that tell us the most about how culture works, how markets shift, how timing and luck and external forces shape what survives and what disappears. C.O.P.S. had everything it needed to succeed: a strong concept, solid execution, a proven formula, corporate backing, and audience. But it didn't have the one thing it couldn't control: the right moment. It launched just as the ground was shifting beneath the entire industry, just as kids were discovering a new kind of play, just as the cultural mood was changing, just as the market was being disrupted. And no amount of good character design or catchy theme songs or well-made toys could overcome that. C.O.P.S. was fighting crime in a future time. It just didn't realize the future was already here, and it looked nothing like what anyone expected. The future wasn't cyberpunk cities and enhanced cops. It was a little gray box that plugged into your TV and let you jump on mushrooms and save princesses. And once kids discovered that, there was no going back. If you remember this show, if you had the toys, if you sang that theme song, if you've been trying to remember the name of that futuristic cop cartoon for years, drop a comment. Tell me which character you remember, which figure you had, what this show meant to you. And if you want more deep dives into the forgotten cartoons and toy lines of the 80s and 90s, the ones that almost made it, the ones that got buried by bad timing or market shifts or cultural changes, hit subscribe. I've got a whole series planned, and trust me, you're going to want to see what's next. Thanks for watching.